Well, hello everyone. Today it is a beautiful day in Wyoming, and we are here to talk all about building Wyoming's future. And we're specifically talking about housing today. Gosh, we have a tremendous number of participants already, and people are streaming in. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I we're having this conversation because over the last few, well, probably longer than the last few months, but definitely in the last few months, the topic of housing is pretty darn hot. And I think that the panelists that we have with us today would probably agree that it's been going on for a lot longer than that. In the nation, housing is a topic of discussion around whether there's enough housing, what is affordable housing, what is workforce housing, all of those things are really front and center in not only the national headlines, but especially in Wyoming. And we're going to take a deep dive into Wyoming because what we know in Wyoming is it's not a social issue. This is not about free housing. This is about a business issue because our businesses tell us that housing is challenging them from a workforce perspective. And when you cannot find the workforce you need, it's really hard to grow your business. It's really hard to take advantage of opportunities. And it's really hard to build a long-term sustainable business in Wyoming, which we all want to do and we want to encourage. And so as we look at this, I want everyone to realize we're taking a look at it from the business lens. And how is it affecting folks on the ground, folks in businesses, folks who are developers, folks who are at the local government level, the state government level, the people who want to be in Wyoming and have a challenge to do that. We've got a little bit of everything on our panel today. I'm super excited. And one thing I want to say is we're not going to be showing any slides. We're not going to be necessarily talking about a whole bunch of data. We're going to be having a candid and open conversation that will include everyone who's in attendance, not just our panelists. And with that, I'm going to briefly do a quick round around our panelists and say hello, and then ask them a few questions to get us started. So with us today, we have Cody Brooke Robinson, who is in Meeteetse, and she is new to the state, and she's looking to carve her path here and find a way to stay in the state that she is growing to love quickly, which we're really excited to have her aboard. We also have Marty Axland, who is a developer in Casper with Brick and Bond. We have Trey Sherwood, who is House District 14 representative at the state level, as well as the Laramie Main Street. She's on the Laramie Main Street. And then we have Kyle Brost, who is from Thermopolis with Gotchi. And we have Claret Chaffin from the city of Douglas. So we've got a good group. Oh, and it looks like Terry Moss just joined us. We'll get to check his microphone as we speak or as he
Yep,
speaks, I
it's
suppose.
working.
Oh, it's
It's
working.
working. How are
It's
you? Sorry, I had to
working.
join a little late. Thank you for having me.
You're sounding great, Terry. Terry is the Chief Operating Officer at Ivinson Memorial Hospital in Laramie. And again, we've got kind of a really good cross section of folks here. And folks, I'm going to go ahead and just start around the horn here. And I'd like you to tell us in one or two sentences, what does the housing shortage actually cost you in real concrete terms? And I'm going to start off in the top corner of my screen with Trey Sherwood. Trey.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks to the Business Council for hosting this. I'm maybe coming to this as a little bit of a different perspective, but so excited to be part of the conversation. So, as a candidate and as a representative, I love door knocking. I think it's the best way to understand the most pressing issues that the community or the state has. And a common theme among all of my constituents is the cost of housing and what that looks like in terms of a personal sacrifice that people and businesses are making. So 2 years ago, when I was door knocking, typical Laramie middle class neighborhood, and I visited with a very fit, very energetic 6-year-old. Her home that had been built by her grandparents, who had ties to the railroad, was very well kept, small but tidy. She had a deep sense of pride for those original wooden beams and the old perennials that lined her front walk. It was just a charming spot. She is employed full time at the University of Wyoming and she works as a custodian for the physical plant. And really, the conversation when I was like, what keeps you up at night? There was just a pure look of frustration on her face. And she shared with me that the fourth generation of her family, her grandkids, would not be raised in Wyoming because her own children, both college educated, could not afford to live in Laramie. They moved south where they had better jobs and a more attainable workforce housing. This was an absolutely heartbreaking conversation. It was really raw. We both got really emotional, thinking about her not being able to see her kids and her grandkids, feeling like the state has failed this hardworking family. So that stuck with me. And another conversation I'll share real quick at the door was in a more affluent neighborhood of Laramie, and this door knock revealed the story of a successful tech entrepreneur, had made it big in Dallas. He's an alumni of the University of Wyoming, and he moved his company to Laramie to take advantage of the resources at the university and to reconnect with his Wyoming roots. But he shared with me that his home in Laramie was smaller and cost more than his home in Dallas, Texas. He was frustrated that even though he was paying higher than average wages for Laramie, his Texas workforce wasn't able to move to Laramie because they couldn't afford homes in the Gem City. Many of his employees then elected to work remote or find jobs elsewhere. And so, without a housing solution, he's concerned that he won't be able to grow his business in Wyoming. So, I just share those stories. I have many more that really motivate me to be part of the conversation around sound policy solutions to address the true economic and social costs of lack of housing.
Thanks, Trey. Okay, so that was Trey can take this. So I'm gonna rib her a little bit. That was what 1 to 2 sentences looks like to somebody who is a politician. So Trey, thanks for that. I think those stories they're powerful. They're important to know. So we're gonna try to do this a little bit rapid fire around the horn, and then we're gonna get the audience involved. So next, I'm gonna go to Marty Axland in Casper. Marty, tell us 1 to 2 sentences. What does it mean to you at Brick and Bond?
Well, I think as a developer, it's about opportunity, right? We're seeing a lack of opportunity because we don't have affordable housing. For us, it comes down to price, construction price. Do projects pencil? We're seeing projects out of town from contractors out of town being able to beat local contracts or local contractors in the tunes of millions of dollars. And we've got to figure out how do we make projects in Casper or in Wyoming less expensive so that we can compete and so that we can build to take care of some of these issues.
All right, businesses and communities need to be able to compete. I like it. Okay. All right, we're going to go next to Terry Moss at Ivinson Memorial. Hey, Terry, how are you?
Hi, and I'm sorry I'm not in a spot where I'm at work, but I wanted to join this call because I think it's really important. So, as a large employer in Albany County, um, it's really important to make sure that we have good affordable housing for our staff, not just the nurses, but the entire staff. And we typically don't have a lot of inventory on the market. And so that creates hardships. People are always looking to move up in different types of housing. So from like an apartment to a townhouse to a full house. And then also working with the local LCBA and the housing shortage there. We talk about just the power issues that happen in our county, that we don't have enough of it and that we need to get more of that to create more housing. So it's pretty broad, but something we're all facing, not just in Albany County, but across the.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Terry. All right, Cody Brook in Meeteetse. Tell us a little bit about how it's affecting you specifically.
I think for me, I'm speaking more from current day from the employee perspective rather than the employer perspective, which I think is also really important. And I would say that right now I'm the director of the Meeteetse Visitor Center, which is a pretty critical role for our community. And there was a time there when I thought, okay, I've been doing this job for about 5 months and I think I may have to move because something happened with my housing situation. And I really wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make something work in Meeteetse again. And so I had just been doing some rigorous training for 5 months and was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it work here. So I just scrambled and had to get really creative with that and ended up buying a camper because I'm so dedicated to making something work here. But I would say it's costing me focus. It's costing me being able to get rooted. That's the main thing. I have businesses that I want to bring here and goals and plans, but everything's kind of revolving around just getting rooted and getting the main things handled first so that I can then make a path and create that vision here. So that has to be priority number one, and that just hasn't settled yet. So I would say it's impeding growth for people like me in that way.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you're bringing that perspective to it. And I want to say thank you for loving Wyoming that much to be able to make those kinds of sacrifices and do what it takes to be here. Definitely appreciate that. Clara, let's go to you and talk a little bit about what that cost is to you in your role at the City of Douglas.
Yeah, my role at the City of Douglas, I'm the Community Development Director. And what we find is we have lost essential workers. And I'm talking about the nurses and doctors, our teachers, emergency personnel, government, because of the housing shortage. Our primary job workers for our industry, they either live in our hotels or they commute over an hour to come to their jobs. Secondary jobs, they just can't even find employees. So our restaurants, our retail, our entertainment can't find employees because of the lack of housing. It really hurts our economy because our businesses can't grow. We can't have new businesses come into the community. Some of our businesses have gone out of business because of a lack of a workforce. And we hear day after day from specifically our hospital and our school district that they lose doctors and technicians, nurses, and teachers because they simply don't want to drive from Casper, which is 50 miles away, especially in the Wyoming winter. So we're really seeing it that it's impinging our ability to grow our economy and diversify our economy away from that reliance on resource extraction.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So Kyle, round us out on this question about what it's costing you in real terms, and then we're gonna talk to the audience a little bit here.
So I am the CEO of Gotchi Performance Longevity Centers. We have 8 clinics throughout the state, and the cost to us is recruiting individuals. So our surest path to recruiting new team members, which are physical, occupational, and speech therapists, is through students and new graduates. And if there's either not enough inventory, not enough suitable housing within our communities, or housing is out of their price range, obviously that's the barrier to recruiting those individuals. And when they are in that position, it's easy for them to opt out and pick a different state to go to, a different place to go to. And so we have certainly lost out on recruits and students because we can't get them housing that works for them.
You bet. You bet. And that makes it tough to expand and to build a sustainable business in those communities. So, all right. So we're gonna turn it over to the audience for a couple things, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, audience, down at the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat function. You can click on that. I would like you to use one word that describes Wyoming's housing challenge right now. Just pick one word and chat that in right now. We're going to give like 30 seconds to this, and we'll start reading those in and seeing how, what the feel is. Oh, well, it looks like a little bit of a technical snafu. It looks like chat is disabled for attendees. So we're just going to go right to a poll instead. All right. So let's do this poll instead. Apologize for that. So here is your first poll. Take a moment and read through this and then submit your answer. Just choose one of those things. As those answers come in, we'll be able to show the results as they come in. All right. So thanks for answering those. We've already had 104 people answer. It looks like the biggest the biggest cost of doing nothing, at least to this audience, is that about 45% of you said that losing young people because they lack the opportunity to build a life here, and businesses are unable to hire the workers they need to succeed. Yeah, boy, that's a big chunk. That's almost 70, that's a 71% of folks are seeing that those are big things. And so if we think about it, these are real problems that our citizens and our businesses are facing. And I really, really hope that we kind of take this and we kind of carry that forward because that is the key to what we're trying to solve here is how do we help young people and mid-career professionals find places to be and be in the place that they love, as well as how do we help businesses succeed? And I think these things all work together. It's pretty clear that that there's a relationship there between those things. So thank you for that. So I have a quick question for everybody. Does anybody else that is out in the audience want to ask a question either of the panel or provide a little bit of feedback from their perspective? So if we can, let's see if we can get an attendee who is either chat in a question or um, talk about that. Looks like we've got a few hands raised here. Let me see if I can get a couple folks to talk here. All right. Let's see. Joe Kilpack. I'm going to let you jump in. Joe, if you could unmute yourself and tell us a little bit. Joe, we are unable to hear you right now. All right, we're going to move over to Elliot real quick. Elliot, can you unmute yourself and share some commentary?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
We can. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Good. I'm trying to grow my flight school by moving it over to Rollins from Laramie. And in order to house students and staff, I want to build a dormitory for about 120 rooms. And I just discovered that there might be an issue for water. And my question was, is there anything that the Wyoming Business Council might be able to do to assist the town of Rawlins with their water issue?
Well, that's a fair question. As somebody whose dad lives in Rollins and I grew up there, I know that they are experiencing some challenges with their water system. Generally speaking, the business council programs focus on that growth, not necessarily the operations and maintenance or kind of sustainability of a current system. However, we do know that that's a challenge, and I think there are other elements that we might be able to use, not necessarily our agency but I think throughout the state to address that. So, Elliot, thanks for bringing that up. And I think that there are some plans in the works to at least assess that and see how that might be able to be remedied. Joe,
Excellent.
it looks like we got you back here. If you got the ability now, we're here.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
You bet.
All right. Sorry about that, guys. I had the microphone on the wrong piece. Anyway, I'm Joe Kilpack. I'm actually living in Cheyenne. I'm a builder developer. I'm also the state rep for the National Association of Home Builders. I'll be out in DC the week of the 8th. So like in about a week, I'll be out there talking with our legislators about everything. And so it's interesting because this is a huge topic, and I wanted to share a few things that it's not just in Wyoming, it's nationwide. And I know this is specifically for our communities here in Wyoming, which is important to understand. But coming from a builder's perspective, coming from a developer's perspective, we've been having this conversation for 4 years now. And I think it's finally starting to come to a little bit of a head where a lot of communities are starting to really struggle because, geez, I wrote it down. Clara, I think you said it, that there in Douglas, you guys are losing your essential employees. And I'm sure it's not only isolated to Douglas. I'm sure it's isolated or not isolated to them, just everywhere in general. And so some of the interesting things that we talk about is when it comes to affordable housing, I, I think that's a tough word, guys, because affordable is subjective. Trey, you shared the example of the gentleman who moved from Dallas, and he comes to the city of Laramie, and it's super simple for him to buy a home because he's got a ton of money that he made in Dallas, versus the other gal who's a fourth generation individual who can barely afford to live where they're at, or their kids can't afford to stay there, right? And so what we really got to be focusing is on attainable housing, not affordable housing. What's actually attainable for the individuals in that community, because each community's demographics are very, very different, and what they can afford and what they need is very, very different. One of the biggest things we face as a developer in the state of Wyoming, I can give you guys, I can talk about this subject for hours, by the way.
So just real quick, Joe, I just want to remind you that we don't have hours.
I know. I'll be
And we
quick.
have 140 people on the line that might
I will
want
give you one more minute, 60 seconds of what I had to say. What I was going to say in general, what we face is one, when it comes to the development aspect of it, NIMBYism, not in my backyard. That's a huge problem in the state of Wyoming. Any kind of support we can get with the legislatures to be able to enforce or change some laws so that we don't have that happening. So that's one issue. The other issue is just really coming down to just what people perceive value as. Um, it's hard. Costs are going up every single day as a builder. Um, I'm telling you, I promise you guys, builders are not making more money. They're making less money. The subcontractors are the ones who are making the money. It's the materials are the ones who are making the money. So we have a commerce issue. Getting materials here that are affordable is a big challenge. But those are kind of my 2 cents. I've got more things I can chat if you want to chat later. Anybody can reach out to me. I'm happy to share that information for you. So
We'd love it. Thanks, Joe, and thanks for being able to take a little good-natured ribbing on that too. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. I'm going to turn it back to the panel now. I'm going to ask Marty Axland, who's a developer in Casper, to talk a little bit about this because I think that that question about material costs and delivery and a lot of those things, that is a question that we get out there. In fact, an audience member asked, how does specialized materials delivery costs impact a rural state like Wyoming specifically? And Marty, you've had a few developments that you've done and have some experience with this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we are on an island to an extent, right? I mean, we've got it's a long journey to get items to Wyoming, but I do think Joe's right that there's a place where these projects start to balloon in terms of cost, and that's somewhere that we're really digging into. And again, don't always have the answers, but we're trying to figure out and dig into why. Why can we bring materials in on truck from Wisconsin significantly less expensive than from Denver? Why is that? Why is that happening? How is that even possible? And so we're continuing to dig in to better understand, local electricians versus out-of-state electricians, how it can be half the cost. We need to better understand, these impacts because it is holding projects back. Imagine if projects still were in that two or 300,000 or 200 to $200 square foot range on a commercial side of a project. They're just not that way anymore. And so it's holding projects back. And so if we want to unleash the economy and we want to unleash bigger housing developments, we've got to figure out the pricing because it really is holding us back because developers aren't going to develop if it doesn't pencil. If they can't make money and it doesn't work, land will stay empty. It'll stay vacant.
Thanks, Marty. And so that's an interesting thing. I don't know if everybody caught it there, but one of Marty's findings in a recent project was that he was able to bring in labor and materials from way out of state, not next door, and it was actually cheaper. And so there are some things that we need to dig in and ask the why, because that is a challenge that we need to figure out. And so I appreciate that Marty, that
And Josh,
insight.
we'll tease you. We'll say not cheaper, less expensive.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's right. We don't spend money, we invest it. I got it. That's right. So here's a question, and maybe it's for Trey. And Trey, I think as you're somebody who works with business owners in the Main Street area and you're a legislator, How do you think local business owners and local leaders that may not be part of the government, but local business owners and local leaders, how should they engage and sort of have their voices heard?
Yes, thanks, Josh. Thanks for that question. I think that came from Sarah. One of the things we have seen, and going back to the NIMBYism, is anytime that there's a housing project proposed in our community, the folks that feel nervous around change come out and become the loudest voices at our council meetings or school board meetings, county commission meetings. And we need the people in our business community and our local leaders to step up and be the voice of the majority and say, yes, change is hard and scary, but we need this for our community to thrive and to show up where those conversations are happening. So go to city council and make public comment, send a letter of support, write a letter to the editor. If you see somebody, ranting on social media, if you can be the voice of reason to say, actually, I support more housing because it's beneficial to our community, X, Y, and Z, beneficial to our business. I know that I think they're on here. I'm guessing the Wyoming how Neighbors for Housing is trying this approach to have people who are pro housing who can show up and offset those NIMBY conversations at the local level so that our elected leaders feel more comfortable supporting housing developments moving forward.
Thanks for that, Trey. I'm gonna just quickly jump into where we got the chat function ready to go. So if you can chat in that one question or that one word that would describe Wyoming's housing situation right now, I'd sure appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Josh, this is Terry. You
Hey,
mind if I
Terry.
share just a little bit?
Yeah, as these words are coming in, tell us. Yeah,
Yeah.
Terry.
Well, I think I see all these words coming in, and I think every area is different, right? Some people it's cost, some people it's lack of inventory, some people it's um, might be what's affordable in their area and what that means to them. But I think what's important is getting together in your communities to come up with solutions that can drive change and not just drive change from the city council. I think that's important and the building process and the access, but also driving change from how can we come up with some solutions with organizations like yours and others to say, we're ready to do a project that could really impact and be a game changer and maybe a story for future growth. So just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and as these words are coming in, we're seeing a lot of challenges, right? There are definitely a lot of challenges. I think people feel it as inventory, capacity, unattainable, dire, crisis, limited, scarce, expensive. We're seeing a lot of that NIMBYism missing, and so I think it is important for us to kind of see the challenge that we have in front of us. But I also think it's important for us to make sure that we take a look at the other side of it too, and sort of begin to ask ourselves not only what are the barriers, but what are some of the tools that we might have. And so I wanted to see if Clara maybe could talk a little bit about the policy and local policy side on things like YOPass and community level planning tools. Clara, would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. When I was watching that chat come through, the one word that actually stood out to me was opportunity. Because this isn't, I mean, we can look at this problem from a very negative perspective, but we can also look at it as an opportunity to change our codes so that we can be more friendly to development, an opportunity to partner up with different groups and entities that maybe we haven't partnered with before in order to make that housing problem go away. an opportunity to do a grant stack so that you take several different grants, stack them together, and get those barriers and costs away from the developers, such as the infrastructure that comes in. And so I think that when it comes down to a policy side of things, one of the things we do in Douglas is we're constantly updating our codes, our land development codes. We struggle a little bit with the building code side of things because of the state statutes. But what we're trying to do is loosen things up enough so that developers have the opportunity to come to us with solutions. And as long as those meet the criteria of the health, safety, and welfare of our residents and our citizens, then we're going to look into that. And we're going to say, you know what, maybe that solution is better than what we've thought of in the past. We'll update our code to enable that to happen. We have a subdivision that we're completely thinking outside of the box on taking away some of the costs where the city owns the property. We're looking for ways to pay for the infrastructure. And then the homes themselves will be attainable housing. We'll set it at a certain AMI. They'll be deed restricted, so they can't be bought by somebody who has more of a higher income than, say, a teacher does, and then sold at a higher price. And that attainable will change as year on year changes happen with incomes and what is that AMI looking like. And so we're really working on how do we think outside the box and how do we make that a reality. And we're partnering up with all sorts of different groups and organizations. We're talking to everybody we can possibly talk to come up with unique solutions. So I think that's really, really important from the local government side to not do things the way you've always done them before.
Yeah, Clara. So first of all, kudos to seeing that problem as an opportunity and to taking advantage of that now. I want to ask you maybe a little bit deeper question here because I know there are a lot of folks that might be in a similar situation where they're in maybe at a city level or a county level or a state level, and they're saying, yeah, but some of these regulations we need to have, don't we? And so talk to me about how you created the change space to do some of these things that are outside the box, because that's not normal.
It's hard and it's unusual for sure. When I talk about let's go with building codes for example, those building codes are set by the International Code Council for the safety of the resident or the user of that structure. But maybe you don't need to necessarily adopt things like the environmental side of it, right? The energy efficiency side. We all believe energy efficiency is a good thing, absolutely. But if that now prohibits a development from happening because the costs have gone up too much, where can we do a little bit of give and take? So we focus primarily on the safety aspect, and if that is met, then we're willing to move forward. Something else that we found is our developers are bringing forward different materials that we haven't seen in the past. So in our downtown, for example, we had a developer come forward with a fire paint, basically. It added a whole hour of fire rating just by painting it onto the wall. It was a fantastic material. We hadn't seen it before. We got the specs on it, said, yep, this meets it, and we move forward with it. So whenever somebody can bring a solution to the table, we'll vet it, and then more often than not, we allow for it. In our land development code, we open things up and allow for alternate plans. So one of the things to reduce cost of development that I think we are the only community in the state that does this, we don't have parking minimums or maximums in Douglas. We tell the developer, you tell us how many parking spots you need and give us the data to back it up. And then we also highly encourage shared parking lots. So we're significantly reducing the amount of parking that we're seeing in our community. It saves the builder and it reduces that heat island effect that you get from parking lots. And we have the same thing with our landscape and our drainage. Like they can do alternate plans if they come up with a solution and back it up with data.
So I mean, I think that willingness and that openness to say, "Hey, the world is changing around us. Let's adapt to it rather than stick to rigid things that may or may not be Still important. Before we go on, I've got a couple other questions for this panel that I think would be good. I'd like to do another audience poll if we could. We've got another poll that I think matches up with what Clara was talking about, maybe the exciting part or the tools that we could use or the openness that we could try. But I want to do the second poll if we could with the audience about removing barriers. And so I want you to think about the tools that are needed right now in your community. Give maybe 30 more seconds there, or maybe even 15 to answer that. All right, let's take a look at our results there if we can. Okay, split pretty evenly here, it looks like. It's pretty interesting. We've got kind of a pretty even split between state investment to unlock private capital, community building tools for local leaders. So that's good. Removing local barriers so serious builders can get to work, and better alignment so the state and communities can build a future where I love that. I love that. Okay, good. So it looks like some better alignment ends up winning by a nose with I think the Belmont Stakes is this weekend, so maybe we'll use a horse racing theme here. Thanks everybody for answering that question. Now I'd like to, if we could, maybe we ought to turn this to sort of looking at the reasons to stay in our youth and our current workforce and giving folks the mobility to move around within their community, within their career, and also how do we attract and retain youth to Wyoming? And so maybe what we could do is just talk a little bit, maybe Cody Brook, if you would be willing to talk a little bit about this and share a bit more of your story and what is it about that small Wyoming community that attracts you to be there? And what has that experience been like? You mentioned some of the sacrifices you've made, but maybe we could flip it and talk a little bit about the exciting parts and the optimism that you see in
Mhm.
Meeteetse.
Sure. Well, I'm a small town girl. Anyways, that's how I grew up. And I watched my very rural hometown over the years from elementary school to graduating high school just turn into a booming, almost metropolis. And that was when I really started making some notes in my mind about development and the good parts about it and the negative parts about it. And I watched the entire culture of my area change. And the things that I had grown up loving about it were slowly disappearing over time. And I just remember that being really sad. And I went from really loving that area to not, I couldn't wait to get out because it had transformed into a very busy, very crowded, overcrowded place that was full of businesses that you saw in every other town that you went through. I just felt like our small town culture had really dissipated. And there were track homes going up everywhere. Everything felt like it was very cardboard. It was very fast. It was very support this growth right here, right now. And that agricultural community just kind of lost its flair and its touch. And so I just went and traveled a lot of other places. And when I came here, I've lived in a lot of different states, in a lot of different communities, and something very special about Wyoming and in communities like Meeteetse is that the level of stress and busyness is so much lower than the rest of the world. And so when I came here and people were looking me in the eye again and they were stopping to have conversation with me in the stores, that was such a breath of fresh air from where I had been. I actually moved here from Frederick, Maryland. So if you're familiar with that area, it's just a lot of crazy. So that was beautiful to me, but I also love the outdoors. I like to hunt, I like to fish, I like wide open spaces. And I'm not big on rules. I don't enjoy a lot of rules. So Wyoming works for me. And Texas used to have a lot more of that, but it's become so developed. And there's so many metropolis areas in Texas that keep expanding outward into those small communities that it's lost a lot of that. And so Wyoming is kind of like my refuge from losing that, I think. The relationships here are able to be so much deeper because it's so much more community oriented. And it's funny, Metitzi's population is 300, but I've actually had a much easier time developing helpful network connections because people are just more involved in the lives of one another here. And so when you need help, it's actually a lot easier to find it than when you're in Frederick, Maryland, and you kind of only know your five people and everyone else is a stranger around you. People here just have more capacity because they're not overloaded all the time like a lot of other communities in our nation. So it just seems a lot healthier. The air is healthier, the stress levels are healthier. And so it's like, well, and I'm also a horse person. I train horses. I've had horses my whole life. So when I came out here the first 8 months here, I was just working with a lot of ranches. That's very life-giving for me, and that works for me. So I think I just fit into this culture, but I also see the need to help it grow so that it doesn't die. Because when I hear some of these other panelists and guests talking, and we're talking so much about growth, one of the things that I really want to advocate for in the conversation of growth is also fighting really hard to protect our culture. Because once it goes away, if we develop it away and all of our solutions are just band-aid solutions and they don't take into account that long-term culture that we're trying to preserve here, it's going to be really hard to go back to that. So because I am so passionate about how special this place is, that's something that I want to make sure that as the people in these conversations about growth and development, that we're also asking ourselves, how do we preserve what makes Wyoming special? I think most of us know it's our public lands. It's the fact that zoning has protected overdevelopment here. So how do we balance that now with the need to grow and allow businesses to expand?
Yeah, Cody, Brooke, and you said a couple things there I think we really need to think about. And I could tell that, Wyoming is a special place for you, just like it is for all of us. You said, we've got to grow so we don't die. And I think people sometimes forget that you've got to be able to do that, or our culture will go away completely. And I think there's a really interesting thought about preserving the culture. And I have this crazy idea. Maybe I'm crazy, but I believe our culture is strong enough that it can scale. I believe that in Wyoming, what we have is really special. And I think more people would enjoy it and love it. And I'm not afraid of it dissipating. I think that it's strong enough to grow. And so I think, Cody, you're right. Like we got to make sure that we're growing so that we don't die. And we got to make sure that we extend that culture and make it stronger. And I think that's a way to do it. And so thanks for sharing all of those things. It's always fun to talk with somebody who's pretty new to the state because you say all of the things that we all feel in our hearts. And so it's a great reminder of why Wyoming is a really good place for us. Kyle, I'm going to turn to you because one of the things that I think you have a really unique perspective on is that as a business owner in multiple communities and as somebody who's recruiting and looking to build a workforce here, you're seeing that people might want to be here, but they can't, or if they want to be here, they have to make sacrifices. So talk to us a little bit about ways that you've been able to maybe deal with that, work with it, or barriers that you're finding where you can't.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So what you said, we do operate in a variety of communities, and they each, like a lot of the commenters have said, face different challenges with regard to housing. Several of our communities, it's housing inventory that's the struggle. While I am a fifth generation Wyomingite, I did leave the state for 20 years and just came back last year. So I had my own experience finding housing in Thermopolis, Wyoming. And I'm in a different financial position than a lot of the people we're recruiting who are new graduates. So I had an easier time than some of our new graduates. Uh, for us to recruit, we're in the healthcare space. For us to recruit, our most viable path are students who we can get in the door and get them to experience this Wyoming culture that Cody talked about. Because if we get somebody who can come in and experience the Wyoming culture for a few months, just like you said, Josh, it sticks with them. They want it, they crave it because there is something special about it. But we can't get students in if we can't give them housing, if we can't find a place that's affordable and suitable for them to live. New graduates are coming out of school with student loans, with expenses, and we try to compensate them well. But sometimes the cost in a place maybe like Cody is prohibitive for them, and so they have to look at other communities. So we have lost recruits, healthcare professionals due to lack of housing because there are alternatives. Um, and so some of the things that we've done to try to address that are we actually in Thermopolis own 4 apartments, a duplex, and 3 houses. And we keep one of those open all of the time for recruits and students. The hospital here leases full time a house from us for their residents. Because if we don't have a space open, we won't be able to recruit and retain our employees. In our other communities where we haven't been able to acquire housing yet, we have community liaisons who work with new recruits, with students to find housing that may not be publicly known, that may not be advertised, so that they can find ways to get integrated into the community, a place that is comfortable for them. Because if we can find housing, it amplifies our ability to recruit these individuals. The trade-off from a business standpoint is all of those things come at a significant cost to us, which means that we have to accept a trade-off somewhere else. We may have to factor that into wages, to bonuses, to benefits. And those are all things that I would love to give more money to our people. But I also have to balance being able to have them in a place that they feel comfortable and secure in and enjoy being in so that they can come to love and appreciate the state, the communities, and stick around.
Yeah, I think that your experience, especially with you know working to recruit people and having the type of business where you have people who are trying to come in and maybe it's an internship, maybe it's part of their training, part of their and then not being able to either stick around or not be able to kind of see their long-term career here. That's shared by a lot of employers. I was talking with a good friend of mine who runs a software development team, and he was like, "Gosh, it's really challenging to get people to come to certain areas of the state, and it's a challenge." But at the same time, he was finding some because he was like, "I'm going to solve this problem. I'm not just going to say, oh gosh, there's a problem." And so he was realizing that if he let his people work remote in different communities in the state, that they would be able to go find the places they like. Now that doesn't work for everybody, and obviously the type of business you're in, it doesn't match that. But software developers could work remote. So he kind of looked at it as an opportunity to find a new way to solve it, much like Clara was mentioning and Kyle, like you've done. And I think that's a key thing that we've got to remember is that these are not simple problems. They're not an easy one silver bullet type of a problem where we can just solve them simply. They're going to take a lot of coordination and so maybe I could take a little bit of a turn toward the end here. We've got about 11 minutes left, and I'd like to answer and maybe propose to this group, maybe especially Representative Sherwood in this case. When she's Laramie Main Street, I can just call her Trey, but in this case, I'm going to call her Representative Sherwood. And I'm going to talk a little bit and maybe talk about the alignment between the state, and in some cases, I represent that as the Business Council and the legislature, and the maybe the is there alignment in what we see as a problem and what policymakers and those folks who are thinking about appropriations see as a problem at the state level? So Representative Sherwood, I'm putting you on the spot because here in a couple weeks, you guys are going to do the same to me up in Lander. So
Only fair. Only fair. So is there alignment at the state level? I would say currently no, but I'm very optimistic that that is going to change here in the next few months. My good colleagues have We all have different opinions. We run to serve our communities, but we have different opinions about the role of government. So some of my colleagues believe that housing is not the role of government. So it's not a critical infrastructure, as this conversation in this panel is themed after. Others believe that this is a problem that the private sector should solve on its own without participation from state or local government. Others, I think, are still coming to terms with this being a challenge in their communities, in their small communities. 6 years ago, when I started talking about housing as an economic development issue, I had really good colleagues say, this is not a problem in my community. And now the data is coming out and they're having to come to terms with, yes, it is. The lack of attainable housing is a problem in all 99 of our cities. So educational alignment, that will happen as these conversations happen. And as all of you on this call continue to make your voices heard, and show up and anytime there's a conversation to be had. I want to thank the Business Council for realizing that this is an economic barrier, but also the Wyoming Business Alliance. So stay tuned to that. And then I think in the chat, there's been conversations about a housing conference, a statewide housing conference in the fall in Casper. Please attend that as well. So I think the winds of Wyoming change are brewing, and I feel optimistic that the state will play a more helpful role moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Trey. I think that's the thing that there is a misalignment, and I think there was a miscategorization of the problem. I think we frame this, or people have framed it as like a social issue, or they framed it as what's the role of government? All good questions, all important to ask. However, I think what we're seeing is it's a very acute business problem. It is absolutely a business problem. And in that vein, we've got to take advantage of policy and investments to change that. And I think that's where, in my mind, there is not a clear alignment yet. I'm also very hopeful that we'll get there. And I think we're pushing the investments into housing projects that sort of push the envelope because this is a business problem. And I think what we want to be able to do is have a legislature and an executive branch that work very closely together on policy that works and solves problems, realizing that, and Representative Sherwood, you know this for sure, every policy we make, every investment we make, it is not going to solve the problem completely. It will solve the problem a little bit, and we're going to have to keep working on it and stay open to that change. And I think I'm very optimistic as well. Although I would say, quite candidly, today, I don't feel that there's a strong alignment, and I think that needs to change. If we're going to solve this problem, and if we're going to utilize the resources that we have in Wyoming to actually change the outcome, rather than sort of posture and say, well, gosh, we want to do it for the free market or government's role. We have to solve Wyoming's problems. And I think that's Representative Sherwood. I think what you're saying as well is let's collaborate to do that. Kyle, you've got your hand raised. I'd love to hear from you, and then we'll work on closing this thing down a little bit.
There was a comment, and I saw the word pop up earlier when people were commenting a single word, and the word was expectation, in terms of whether expectations for housing may be a little bit too high or unrealistic. And one of the comments is that maybe shorter term, more temporary housing as a way to scale up to permanent housing might be a viable path. And I think there's a valid discussion around there. From my standpoint as an employer, if I can get somebody into permanent housing, it gives me a much stronger sense that that individual is going to stick with us and be here. I know that they're going to feel like a bigger part of the community, having their own space, their own home that they feel proud of and secure in. And so I think that there's a valid conversation about maybe what populations more of that shorter term roommate housing share space might be. But for the professionals that I'm recruiting, I want them to be here for at least 3, 4, 5, 6 years, if not, their entire tenure. And so if I can get them into a permanent house soon, the chances that they stick around long term are much higher.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. And I think that's the other thing is like helping people realize that stickiness and the path to that. And again, what we're working on here is not we're not trying to explain the current situation. What I think we're all working on is well, we can explain the current situation so that we can understand the problem better. But the only way to fully understand this problem is to begin working on it and trying some things. And I think what I've heard from all of these panelists is that everybody here is trying things that may or may not work, that are not 100% certain, and they won't solve the whole problem, but they're working on making those changes that are necessary to fully understand the problem and begin to solve it. And I think that that momentum that is created when we do that is really it can create an unstoppable force. And I think that's one of the challenges that we had. So somebody asked in the lead up into this, somebody said, well, gosh, that Cheyenne project that went in front of SLIB a few weeks ago or a few months ago, it got denied and it didn't go. What are your feelings about that? I said, well, of course we're frustrated. We work hard on those projects. I know that the city of Cheyenne worked really hard on that project, and I feel like they'll keep going. But it's when we get to this spot where we sort of like stop progress without necessarily thinking it all the way through, that is frustrating. However, we don't see that as the end. And we also don't see our role as the business council as 100% housing, where now all of a sudden we're going to become taking housing projects all the time. We see our role as understanding the barriers to growth in a community, especially in those communities that want to grow, right? And how do we address those barriers to growth with the tools that we have today or with new tools that we might need to create? We kind of see ourselves as research and development around policy and investments. And so we do have a couple more projects that are housing projects coming our way in Douglas and in Wright that are coming at us on the June 8th SLIB meeting. They'll be in front of SLIB in just a heck, less than a week. And so, folks can have an opportunity to have your voice heard. You can also plug in and understand this conversation even better through that. But again, our job is to daylight the problem. Our job is to solve it when we can, or at least propose solutions that might be able to scale. And our other job is to make sure that people get involved and can be part of the solution. It will not be the Wyoming Business Council that solves Wyoming's economic challenges. And I know people are like, well, isn't that your job? Yes, it is. However, it is the 140 people that are on this call. It is the people in your community that are working on it. And it is those folks that will create the momentum that will change the course and build our culture stronger and make our towns be able to grow to survive. It's not the policy that I create or the policy that gets enacted or the money that I am able to invest in the state. It is the work that we all do to get that. And I really appreciate one, so many people showing up for this. It's clearly a big issue. I think information that we're sharing in this will help inform our policymakers. Information that we're sharing in this should give you confidence at a local level to make those changes and be a little bit more bold in your planning and zoning and codes. Thinking about how we solve this problem with all those tools is important. And I think the other part of it that we all need to remember is that we all have a voice. We all have a voice that we need to have heard. And I think you really, really shared it today, at least with us. And I think over the next few months, we need to continue to do just that. And so with that, I just appreciate the heck out of the folks who came aboard and were part of this panel. I definitely appreciate everybody chatting in and attending and stay tuned for more because these conversations are important. They need to be out there in the open and we need to address them head on. So thanks for your time and thanks for building Wyoming's future.